It's on you.
Hey guys, welcome back to Unapologetically Me. I am your host, Brandi, and I am so excited that I am recording 2 weeks in a row. That's a
Let's go.
plus for me.
Momentum.
And also excited to be back in STP Studios where I am now recording my podcast. So it makes me a little more committed, or a lot more committed actually, to have a space to come to record. And I don't have to do any of the behind scenes things. So that's definitely helpful. I have a guest with me again today, and it is Trent Denson himself,
Yeah.
the
Pumped to
person
be
behind
here.
STP. So, um, just a little bit about how we met. Actually, I don't even think we necessarily met. He was at BNI, which is my networking group,
Mm-hmm.
and then somebody else had told me about him, and I had seen him on social media doing some other people's podcasts, and so I was like, hey, I'm gonna hit that guy up and meet him. And so he actually turned out to be really cool. I started recording in here, and then I was like, hey, want to be a guest on my
Yeah, I
podcast?
sure do. I sure do.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, and how you kind of got started in doing this production part.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you having me on. It's been really cool getting to know you and be part of the Unapologetically Me journey and story. I'm a big fan of what you're doing, and just how all of this has kind of come together has been really cool. Got to give a big shout out to Jessica. Jessica Bryan was the one who actually,
Yes.
That was, I remember the day y'all met, she actually contacted me. She's like, you got to get with Brandi. And I was like, all right. So,
I didn't know
yeah,
that.
so that was part of the whole evolution too. But yeah, so Trent Denson here, Spread the Positive. Been working on this concept, this company, this mission for over 10 years. It's changed directions and courses over the years quite a bit. Just a lot of figuring it out and not even knowing what it was on my end, let alone being able to verbalize that to other people, has been part of the story. But got into podcasting January of 2018. I got hooked on a podcast called Short Story Long with Chris Dramapath from the Robin Big days. If anybody remembers those glorious days of Robin Big, man. Anyway, drama. I just remember drama on Short Story Long, like after he interviewed all these entrepreneurs that have been through it and just failed over and over and over, and then finally made it big. There was like 5 episodes in a row. He's like, if you have anything you're passionate about, start a podcast, start a podcast. And he's like, if I can do it, anybody can do it. I'm the king of awkward. This like gives me all the anxiety, blah, blah, blah. So if I can do it, you can do it. I just remember him saying, I committed to getting one a week out for a whole year and just see what it turns into. I was like, man, I'm going to just straight up go with that too. So no clue what I was doing. Bought a little $30 microphone off of Amazon. I had my MacBook Pro and just started hitting people up like, hey, you want to talk about, the whole tagline with Spread the Positive is bringing light to what's going right. And, I've always kind of had like a little vendetta against like the news cycle and how we glorify everything that goes wrong so much. So always wanted to provide any type of counter to that. That's always kind of been the baseline of all things STP over the years. And then with the podcast, it was just something that I could consistently do and, just talk to people about good stuff happening. And, it's not the delusional foo-foo, gumdrops and rainbows, delusional positivity. Or like toxic positivity. Yeah. Like that's a new buzzword here lately. Definitely not ignoring that there's a lot of hurt in the world and there's a lot of things that could be doing better, but just trying to be part of that solution, part of the help, if you will, and just being able to kind of just provide any type of counter to the overwhelming amount of like doom and gloom and everything's wrong and everybody hates everybody, because I just don't believe it, first and foremost. So from there, just people have asked me over the years, hey, can you help me start a podcast? Hey, like, how did you do this? How did you do that? I'm like, man, I really don't think you know what you're like. You can definitely attest, like just the back end and the consistency and like figuring out hosting and different feeds and just all the things that go into starting, let alone starting and then maintaining a podcast. There's actually quite a bit that people don't really see or know how to do it.
Definitely more than just buying a microphone and setting up the recording stuff. Like there's stuff that goes into it after the fact that you're like, oh shoot, I didn't know how to do that.
The descriptions, like the descriptions hold me up just about more than anything these days, just like writing out and like having show notes and the links and all the stuff. So I never had a really good answer for people until about I guess like 8 or 10 months ago, I was looking to switch my hosting and distribution just for STP because I don't even remember. I was just kind of searching around and came across a new platform that they had like a trial that you could do to see like their premium pro edition. And I was like, oh, Gary Vee and, you know, all these massive podcasts, like the top 100 podcasts in the world, like all go through this this hosting service. I'm like, oh, this is crazy. And kind of bit the bullet, went back to some of those people that were asking me over the years. And I was like, I think I got you now. Cause like I showed you on the back end, just like, hey, if we had these 4 elements, we can build out a show and point at all the different places and it's all in one place. So from there, we're almost to 30 shows now, which is
that's
insane.
amazing. And that's in 10 months.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's been wild. Yeah. And, you know, a lot of figuring it out, a lot of friends and fam, you know, just, hey,
it's kind of learning as you go.
you know, and a lot of mess ups along the way. Big shouts to everybody that's kind of bared with me during this project or just the process of it all. Danny D and Rujarani Davey and people that I've had on the show. And we've done events over the years. And then finally just, you know, I'm like, it took convincing a lot of times. Like, I got you. If you can just commit to 1 hour, send me your show or send me a Zoom link or just whatever we can do just to kind of like build out like the proof of concept, I guess. And it's still very much in that phase, full disclosure. I know you've been very, very patient and, you know, just with the transitions of bringing on new shows and figuring out how to import shows versus creating new shows and all this different stuff. But long story short, we're here, you know, 30 shows ish. Not all of them as consistent as others, of course, but just, you know, the overall, all the shows kind of have that STP message and mission in mind. And I'm excited to get into like the Unapologetically Me stuff because I think it's a unique spin on what I typically would have kind of steered clear of. Honestly, I told you that. I was like, I'm controversial and like, you know, religious and political. I've always just like really tried to steer clear of, but the way you navigate it and your approach to it has a very STP type. Like, I'm just trying to hear what you're saying. So I think it's a beautiful thing. But that's about it. You know, we're here now, 60 plus thousand downloads, and you know, we got a pretty solid proof of concept. I got a post-production guy. Big shout out to Stuart McKee with Slingshot Podcasting. He is a beast, and he's helped me a lot with like the calendars and you know, just the systems and onboarding and a lot of things. So I got to give a huge shout out to Stuart. He is really good at what he does. And so we have a post team, you know, as long as you keep the content coming, we can polish it up and put your message out. So it's a pretty cool thing that's kind of come together. So
I love that. And I really appreciate you having me on your network because I know that's something you said that you're just kind of like, oh, I don't know that that's an area I want to get into or whatever.
Like just reading your description, I was like, but then like once I saw you do it and the way you navigate it, I'm like, that's perfect. So like it's a delicate balance there, but it's totally necessary. And it's a great fit for everything. So, and
it's basically spreading the light to show that, hey, you can have these conversations and we're still good at the end of the day.
Exactly. Which is everything STP. So that's awesome.
So we're going to get into our first kind of topic. And it is about little white lies. And I don't know that this is necessarily controversial, but I think I have a horrible conscience. And I say that like it's a blessing and a curse. So like I just can't stand, like lying is my pet peeve. And I used to be a liar. Like I was the liar of all liars. And I think that's part of the reason that I also hate it because I didn't like that person that I was when I was a liar. So now lying is like, I don't lose friendships or relationships over many things, but if you lie to me, like you're really getting to that line of where I'm like, I'm not gonna mess with you. Man. But having a kid, there's always like those little white lies that you're just like, you know,
that's funny.
I don't lie, but like I want my kid to do this, or even just stuff like about Santa Claus and stuff like that. It's like, okay, well, it's a lie, but it's not a lie. And where do I draw the line?
Right.
So what is your take on like little white lies?
Yeah, controversial. Man, I don't know. You know, I'll be the first to say sometimes I'm not. I feel like sometimes I'll just leave parts out, which kind of in turn turns into
the truth.
No, just like you didn't ask exactly that. I don't know. I mean, yeah, that's tough, man. I do my best, and integrity and being open and honest and everything like that is something, try to do my best at all times. But, sometimes you do, that's tough. That's a tough way to like really say what I'm really trying to say.
So,
But,
okay, let me ask you
yeah.
this. So say you're in a relationship and they, the question of the day from a female is, how do I look in this dress?
Right.
How do you respond to that if you don't really like the dress or you don't like the way she looks in the dress?
Man, oh.
It's a tough one.
That is tough. Honestly, this is the God's honest truth. Like, there's not many ways, like from my girlfriend, for example, when I see her, there's not many times I don't find her just overwhelmingly beautiful.
Yeah.
And that's not fluff and BS or anything. I'm like, you look great, babe. Like, if you like it, I like it. So that one's not as tough. And I legitimately more times than not think she looks amazing. So that's tough, but I don't know. I'd more than likely just go with the you look amazing because it's safe.
It's safe.
And more times than not, it's really what I think. So.
Yeah. I don't really ever ask my husband that, honestly.
Right.
But what I do appreciate is, even if I don't ask, he will tell me.
Yeah.
But he'll just kind of be like, well, I don't think that's really for your body, or like that doesn't really compliment you, which I think is a great, like, you're not lying to me, but you're honest and it's not like, oh, that looks horrible on you.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? And
Gentle
I think that's
correction.
where it goes wrong, where he's very much like this. He's always afraid to hurt my feelings, but I've told him over and over and over, I'd hurt my feelings before you lie to me. Because
there you go.
If you lie to me, I'm going to be pissed and you're going to hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
Whereas if you just hurt my feelings, you'll just hurt my feelings.
There you go.
So
that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I don't do well with even little white lies. Yeah. But at what point, because I know a lot of times too, people will lie because they don't want to hurt your feelings, like I said. So at what point does that little white lie become dangerous?
Man. I mean, that what's the saying? Like, if you don't lie, you don't have to remember what you said.
Oh my God, yes.
So like, yeah, I guess just like the snowball effect of if you do have like a little omission, or if you do have a little,
right.
I mean, it just that's when it snowballs, and you're gonna be backtracking, and then it gets really bad and stuff. So, yeah, I mean, taking an inch, making it a mile is a real thing. Especially just, again, my thing sometimes is just on the communication front, leaving stuff out conveniently because I don't want the smoke at the time, like, and it'll come back and bite me. So that's kind of that's when I get in trouble sometimes.
Yeah. And I feel like that's like a communication thing too. I feel like the person on the other end has to understand. I guess it depends on what you're omitting. Like if they specifically ask you that and then you like go around the answer. But I mean, sometimes people just forget stuff. Like they don't omit it on purpose, or they're not trying to be malicious. And then you're like, oh, well, you purposely did that.
Yeah,
like,
that's the thing. More times than not, I'm like trying to avoid the conflict.
Yeah.
And just hoping that it doesn't come up in the long run, which is a terrible approach a lot of times. But that like I said, that's kind of when I get in trouble sometimes.
Yeah. And I mean, it just goes back to communication, like knowing how to present the information, and knowing the right time, because I think sometimes it's okay to go like, okay, I don't want to have a big blow up right now, so we're going to address this later.
Right.
But making sure you go back and address it so you don't get caught up in omitting information or lying, because that snowball effect is real. And when I mean, in my early 20s, I lied a lot to a lot of people, just about a lot of different things, and trying to keep up with the lies and trying to hide the stuff. It just it's really stressful. Like takes over your mental health, your physical health, because I would just like feel sick to my stomach too. And even it got so bad to the point of like, I went to the other extreme where I was just like overly honest and like with my husband
like
now,
making out for it.
Like kind of making up for it. So I'm like telling him every little detail, and I'm like, okay, that's crazy. Like I went from one extreme to the other, and I finally found a balance of like, okay, I don't have to tell you every single thing that I'm doing during the day. I don't have to tell you every interaction with like another male, but if it's something that I think you need to know, then I can discuss it, and I don't have to worry about like if you find something in my phone, or is he gonna, find out something from somebody else? Like, it just eliminates a lot of worry of having to keep up with stuff.
Totally.
So what about with kids though? Where do you think you don't have kids?
I don't have kids, never been married, so kind of got the easy card on this one. I mean, like with the Santa Claus stuff, I'm like, man, let kids be kids.
Yeah.
I know that's pretty obvious to a certain extent, but and just, I feel like, again, just if you conveniently leave something out or like something that is like that could blow up or become a real issue, and kind of trying to navigate that in a careful way, and maybe not having every single detail that's kind of where I go with it. Like, I'm a people pleaser to a fault, and I don't like conflict, and I don't like I know.
That makes it really hard.
It really does. And that's something I try to get better at all the time, and have gotten better over the years for sure. And that's just part of like boundaries and all the stuff anyway. But in my opinion, I try to just keep the peace. and if it's like Santa Claus told me to tell you, like, don't be a bad kid right now, I'd kind of support that. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. Yeah. I just have a hard time navigating it, because on one hand, I'm like, okay, it's a little white lie. Mm-hmm. So when my daughter finds out that these fairy tale people are not right or not real, mm-hmm. she's going to be like, oh, well, my mom lied about this to make me happy. So that means I can lie to her about something to make her happy, because it's the same mm-hmm. concept. Yeah. But I also am like with you, like, okay, let kids be kids. Like, because I also don't want to be like, Santa Claus isn't real, and then she's the kid that goes and tells all the other kids that's not real. So I'm just, and I guess it goes back or goes to like your intention. Right. What is your intent behind this lie? Like, are you trying to be manipulative? Because I do think that sometimes parents...
That is it. Yeah. Like the intent. Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
I think parents, sometimes we bribe our kids to get them to act a certain way. Yeah. Which I don't think is always great, but
necessary at times.
Sometimes it also becomes manipulative. Yeah, and so when you start falling into that manipulative way of doing a little white lie, I think that's probably when it would become a problem. And I think, even when your kid finds out that these things aren't real, communication, everything mm-hmm. goes back to communication. You explain to them, like, I want you to be a kid. I want you to have fun, mm-hmm. XYZ, whatever. Right. So I think intent on that is
that's a great way to put it. Yeah, I agree with that.
Awesome. Oh, we agreed.
Yay.
Okay, so my next one is about, and we kind of talked about this a little bit, about parenting advice, but not even just parenting advice. So especially with social media now, we get a lot of unsolicited advice, because this is my thought on it. If you post it on social media, you're going to get what you get, because you know that it's public and you chose to post it on there.
Exactly.
But on the other hand, I'm like, just because I posted doesn't mean I want your unsolicited advice. True. So what are your thoughts, especially if it's something that you have not experienced? Like, what are your thoughts around giving advice? Like, you haven't been a parent, so mm-hmm. do you give parenting advice for people that have either never been married or they've been divorced? Should they give marriage advice? Like, should you speak on stuff that you don't have any experience in?
I mean, obviously the first place my mind goes is definitely not, and I'm just kind of thinking back, like I have, had thoughts about the way certain parenting things have happened that I've witnessed. Yeah. And I'm always just like, I guess, I mean, if it really gets to a point and there's like multiple people that are saying it and nobody can step up and say something, like I've done that and it's been difficult. And again, it's not really my place. I don't know your 24/7 365 struggles that you're going through and all that. So like, you always got to tread lightly there for sure. And like, it's definitely, I've never been a parent, and so I don't know, but there's been times where I'm like, man, that's just like reckless. You know, like there's certain times, and like, I don't know, there's been times where that has come up, and like, for some reason, I don't really want to toot my horn on this, but like, I'm the one that can like kind of just bite the bullet and have the conversation, mm-hmm. even if it doesn't go well. It's like what the collective group has kind of been saying behind their back. So it's like, I don't know. That's
so how did the conversation go? Like, were they receptive to what you said?
It didn't go well that time. But I mean,
was that because
it was probably my delivery, honestly.
okay.
It wasn't my best work, but it was necessary at the time, and there was like some crazy stuff happening.
Yeah.
And like, so that's tough. And especially with social media and people inserting themselves, like it's like what you said, people are kind of signing up for it at that point to get
Right.
a degree of unsolicited advice or whatever. And maybe it even is like welcome to a certain extent without even realizing it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's tough. I don't know. I plead the fifth. I don't have either. So I try not. I mean, I do my best to, again, I'm keep the peace. Like I spread the positive, like
avoid conflict at all possibilities.
No, I mean, that's kind of, yeah, I guess so, but it's tough. It's tough to see things that are like what you would consider like fundamentally wrong and not say anything about them. So
yeah,
again, just a fine line and knowing your place, knowing the people involved. And I don't know, I wouldn't advertise that, or I wouldn't, and a lot of that's in-person stuff too. Like worst case scenario, like having to do that. I wouldn't be like, hey, that's not what you should do on social media. Like,
yeah,
way past that these days.
I think that, well, like you said, it depends on your delivery.
Definitely.
And there's situations, especially in parenting. I mean, obviously, if a kid's getting the crap beat out of them, like I don't have to be a parent to tell you that that's not okay.
Right.
But just certain stuff of like, I'm in this mom's group on Facebook, and people are always asking like about feeding your kids baby cereal and taking your kid to the doctor, and just always asking. They are always asking for advice a lot of the time, but then it just gets like crazy where everybody starts arguing about what you should and shouldn't do. And I am working on, I've gotten a lot better, but I used to give unsolicited advice just in general, or trying to like share my experience when somebody else is saying like what they're going through. And I've had to learn to ask first, like, because I don't want to make it about me if you're like pouring your heart out. So I'm like, okay, are you asking for advice or are you just venting?
Right.
Because if you're just venting, I'm just gonna let you talk. If you're asking for advice, I'm gonna give you my 2 cents that you may not like.
Right.
And
that's huge though. Just taking that one step is massive.
Yes.
So
and it works really well. Like
right.
Then my friends will be like, I'm asking you for advice. And a lot of them will call me initially and be like, I'm asking you for advice because they know you're just like
straight out the gate. Like,
yeah.
Okay.
And my delivery still isn't always good.
Right.
Sometimes they're just like, you don't have to be so mean about it. But
you asked for it.
I'm also having to work on my delivery.
Yeah.
And I have friends that have older kids or have stepkids. And sometimes I'm just like, in my head, I'm like, I don't know that I would have done that. But I don't say nothing unless they ask, because I'm like, I don't have a kid that age, and I can only assume what I would do if that were me, but I can't say, because until it happens to you, you don't know what you would do.
Right.
So like there's
100%.
There's stuff with COVID where people are like, go to work, don't go to work, don't do this, don't do that. And I'm just like, you can't tell somebody else what they should or shouldn't do because you're not living their life and you don't know what's best for them.
Right.
So unless you've been there, which even then every situation isn't the same, then if they don't ask, then shut up.
Right.
Don't have nothing to say. So what about marriage advice or even relationship advice? Like, what boundaries do you feel like go with that?
Man, I guess it's kind of the same thing. Just relationship advice and just like seeing, that can just be observations, I think that's not necessarily a judgment or like, just expressing your opinion about certain things you've observed and like how that's affected people in your life prior to that. I feel like that can be okay. And I guess it kind of goes back to what you said, just being able to ask first if you're even, I guess it goes back to just, I think the ask thing that you just said is like kind of just eliminates 90% of the problems that can come from this. Right. So if you're just like jumping down someone's throat for no reason because you saw something that their significant other did that you don't approve of, like that's not productive in my opinion, or more times than not, that's not going to be productive. But if you kind of go, hey, do you mind if I share something with you about blah, 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 blah. And I think it could tie into like what you're going through, and that's the better approach. And again, never been married, but several relationships over the years. And feel like just basic 101 human 101 stuff kind of just comes into play regardless of marriage or anything along those lines. So I don't know. I mean, is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I really think the ass thing that you said like eliminates 98% of like anything that could come from giving too much advice or inserting yourself where you shouldn't.
Yeah.
Which is easy to do too. So
it absolutely is. Sometimes I have to remind myself to just keep scrolling.
Right.
There was a post today on Facebook that somebody, whatever the original post, somebody commented and they were like, oh, okay, well, you need to eliminate sugars. So, but the first thing they said is to drink Pedialyte and Gatorade. But then their sentence after that, they were like, you need to eliminate all sugars from your diet. And I was like,
there's a lot of sugar in Gatorade. Yeah.
It's like those two sentences literally contradicted each other. But I was like, this is not my post. I don't even know this person. So let me just keep scrolling. Because I was just like, did you read what you wrote? Because that doesn't even make any sense. Right. But I didn't say nothing because I was like,
good job.
It's too early.
You did it. Good job.
But I really wanted to.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so I have this one. So what about men giving relationship advice to women or vice versa?
I'm usually like pretty for that, or like I'll go to certain like close girlfriends about situations I'm in. So I think
okay, well, let me explain that better. Men giving women relationship advice on how women should act.
Ooh. Yeah, again.
Avoiding the conflict.
Don't want that smoke. Nah, I mean, it's not really our place ever, really, right? I mean, I don't personally insert myself in those situations, or if I have, then it usually doesn't go well, I feel like. So I don't know, like that's something I just kind of, me personally, I don't think a man should be able to tell a woman how to live their life at any capacity. Like, it's just old ways of thinking, and just more times than not just wrong. Like we've done a great job at being complete assholes to y'all for so I'm of the notion of, man, some of these are really hard. Like, that's just not our place. Like, if anything, we should be supportive and open and accepting and help where we can, versus like criticize or insert our judgments. Like, that's not our place, in my opinion.
Yeah. Have you heard of Kevin Samuels?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so he's this guy that my husband listens to, and he brought him up about something, and I just was like, why is this man giving relationship advice to women? I was like, that's why the women don't listen to him. Is that the guy that
got called out recently?
No, that was probably Derek Jackson.
Oh, yeah. That was quite
he's
comedic. Yeah.
No, Kevin Samuels, he's old. He's, I think, like in his 50s.
Okay.
But I was like, why is he giving advice to women? I said, that's why they don't want to listen to him, because he's a man.
Right.
And then I was like, well, is he married? And he was like, well, he's been divorced twice. I was like, okay.
Exactly, yeah.
So then I started listening to him, because I was like, well, I want to hear like what he's saying, what he's talking about. So a lot of it, he talks about like high value dollar men and women that want a high value dollar man, which is like 500,000 plus money. So that's a lot of what he talks about. But there was one episode that is what really got me, and I understood what it was that he was trying to do. The woman was talking about, she had got married young, they had 3 kids, and then when she got older, she decided she didn't want to be married anymore to that guy. So Kevin Samuels was like, well, what did he do? Like, what happened? What did he do wrong? And she basically was like, he didn't do anything wrong. I was young and dumb, and I don't want to be married. So he was like, okay, so you threw this man in the trash for no reason, and now you want another man to come take care of you and your 3 kids. And he was like, that is our problem with women like you, who like, okay, if I say, let me give you a chance, and then you, of course, you're always going to ask, well, like, what happened in your last relationship? And then you tell me you divorced him for no reason. Why would I want to be with you? So then it clicked for me that he's not giving women relationship advice based on them. He's giving women relationship advice from a male perspective.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's very different, because he's telling you basically what men see based off of your actions or what you're saying, and how it looks to them, how they're perceiving it.
Yeah.
So then I was like, oh, I love this guy. I went back and told my husband, I was like, I love this guy. He's amazing. Like, once you understand. But I was like, the problem is that a lot of women, which I can say this, a lot of women, one, we don't want to be told we're wrong. We don't want to be told what to do or how to do it.
Mhm.
And so even if somebody comes to us and they're like, I'm trying to help you understand from the male perspective, we're just like, you don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
So I think in that aspect, that giving women relationship advice, like, I'm trying to help you know what men are thinking and what they're seeing based off what you're doing.
Right.
And so, because I'm usually like, if you haven't been married, especially if you haven't been married, like, how can you give me marital advice? But I even think if you've been married and divorced, you can still give marital advice because you know what not to do, at least.
Yeah.
But if you've been married 5 times and divorced 5 times, that's a different story.
Right.
Like,
that's a pattern. Yeah.
Then you're the problem.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just
common
that
denominator. Right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think that it depends on how, again, it goes back to delivery and why you're doing it.
Right.
Like, what is your intent?
Yeah.
I think everything can go back to communication and what your intent is.
Right.
As far as giving unsolicited
One
advice.
of my go-to things here lately, this guy on another podcast said, there's a spectrum, and it's like fear and doubt and love and acceptance. And like, if you're always like coming from this side of the spectrum, kind of the intent side of it, I guess, I think, and you ask and you have these like steps in place to, like, if you do see something that you feel like is warranted for you to say something, like, just come from that place of love and acceptance, as cliche as that sounds, versus like, I'm fearful or like I'm mad, you know,
Right.
like, so if you just kind of take, again, that second to pause and reflect and be like, yo, I'm coming from a good place. Like, I'm not maliciously attacking you. I'm not mad at you. Like, I just really, like, I honestly want to know, like, I'm here to help. Is there, like, what do you think about this perspective versus, you know, just being like, oh, you're wrong. That's not what you should do. Like, using I first language, all that type of stuff too, really can kind of.
That's a big one that I think, I did a post on it, but I think a lot of people don't know about, is like using I messages. Like, make it about you, don't make it about the other person.
Like, saying you should is a terrible way to start.
Yes.
You know, like,
I'm bad at that.
Yeah, me too. And it's hard. Like, it's hard not to just jump in straight out the gate like that.
Especially in the moment. Like, if it's if they just upset you and you wanted to express that right away, it's hard to not automatically go to, well, you did this and you made me feel this way and it's all your fault.
Yeah, right.
Like,
exactly.
It's hard to take that step back and be like, okay, let me.
This made me feel this way. Yes. I would like to express my disapproval, if you will, because of X, Y, and Z. Versus like, you're wrong and you really messed up. So yeah.
And I'm really bad about that. But I used to be really bad. I'm still pretty bad. But
self-awareness though. Like,
yeah. So a lot of times I'll just be like, I just won't say anything. And this is also not good communication, but like, it's what works right now, is that I will just send a really long text message.
Yeah.
And then I'll be like, I can't. And I even told my husband, like, I was like, I know we should be able to talk about this, but I'm not there yet.
Right.
And I want to be able to still express my feelings, but not have a blow up argument or not get emotional, and like writing.
Writing it out. Yeah.
It helps
I do
you
that
get it
too.
out, and it gives
too.
you time to process your thoughts and make sure that you're not saying anything that you're going to regret.
Exactly. No, I do that too.
It's very helpful.
Yeah.
There was something you said. Something that you just said in your small little thing, and I was going to bring up something. I think it was maybe from another podcast about just coming from a place of love and coming from wanting an understanding of things. And it might have been the 2 Balls Deep one with the transgender parent.
Yeah.
Or the parent with the transgender kid.
Mm-hmm.
But I really liked their podcast because that was something
those two
that they explain, you know, like, this is coming from, like, we want to understand. And I think the podcast really helped me, because I don't care what anybody does. I don't care what you do with your life.
Yeah.
But one of the questions that they asked was like, okay, because the mom kept saying, well, like, my kid transitioned. And so I don't know which one of them asked, but they're like, what does that mean?
Right.
Because I thought it meant the same thing they did. Like, once you transition, that means like you're having surgeries or you're taking hormones or something. And I was glad that they asked, because then she explained, like, you know, at this age, it doesn't mean anything. It literally just means that they're now want to be the opposite sex or whatever, the opposite gender. And so I was kind of relieved because I'm like, thank God, because I honestly thought that like people were out here. I didn't know what age that it started at, like doing
No,
hormones
that's
and
like,
stuff like that.
right. That is, I was similar boat as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I learned a ton that night for sure. And that's important. Like, and that's, oh man, like just misconceptions and perceived judgments. Like that's what 95% of the problems of the world are. Like just not knowing. And like, I'll be the first to say, I was not familiar, like with a lot of the stuff that's, just the Two Bottles Deep podcast has taught me a lot, period. Like straight up and down. Heterosexual white male. Like I don't know about there was an episode with a gay guy or a guy that's gay from Memphis that grew up and like went to the army, like all of these crazy hard overcoming things. And I'm like, I have no point of reference to that.
Yeah.
And just hearing his life and what he's been through and how he's done it. I mean, it hits you right in the gut. You're like, man, like again.
Is that the episode you were listening to whenever we came in the other day?
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah. So the one with Chris is the guy from Memphis, and then Austin is a Marine with the younger brother that's gay. Okay. So I mean, shouts to the Two Bottles to you guys, Wes and Philip. They're both just they're really, really gifted in the way that they can communicate with people and have those difficult conversations. And that's what's pretty special about this whole platform in general, like this conversation and that, like those conversations. And sometimes it really hits me. Like I'll just be like driving down the road and, I'll be listening to any of the shows we do. And I'm just like, man, this is cool. Like not to do my own work, but like, this is really cool that like you can just tap into this network, if you will, and pick and choose what you'd like to learn more about. Right. Like that's pretty cool. And having a lot of different, if I do say so myself, that's pretty cool. So.
It is. And having a lot of different, again, perspectives. Like I think I said it on my podcast with T, just about everybody has a different perspective in life, and you don't know what you don't know. Exactly. So if you don't grow up around it, or you didn't experience it, or you don't have friends that are in it, like even listening to them and they're gay and in the LGBT community, like they're just like, I don't know anything about this.
Exactly.
And like, no. It's just, again, it opens your eyes to like, okay, it's not just me. Like there's people that are in that community, and everybody kind of clumps them together. And I feel like that happens. I feel like that happens all with everybody. I feel like it happens with men and women. And if you're Black, if you're white, everybody just, you become generalized. So you're not an individual. You're just a group of whatever that group is. And people, and people forget, like, no, I'm an individual person and my experience is not the same as that person. And just because they know about that or they did it doesn't mean that I do. Exactly. But it's good to learn and educate yourself. And that's why I think that having these conversations are important, because I don't know what your life has been like. I don't know what experiences you have had. And people will find out that more times than not, they have a lot in common. They probably have more in common than they don't have in common.
Exactly.
And it's like, we just let these small, tiny little things.
Labels, divide us.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to think of that word. And I can't.
That's it. And that's by design too. Like that's something that, like, not to get all conspiracy land on us, but it's not even a conspiracy at this point. Like it's just literally factual. Happening. Yeah. It's by design. Like it's in mission statements of these media companies, like cause fear or something like that.
Have you watched on Netflix, what is it called? The Social Dilemma. Social Dilemma. Mm-hmm. Like you haven't watched it?
I'm familiar. Yeah.
Oh my God. They literally lay everything out for you and the psychology behind social media. And this is why I make it a point to keep friends of all different everything on my Facebook, because I'm like, I don't want to get sucked into only seeing one side of things. Yeah. And so I will sometimes, if I don't see somebody's post for a long time, like I'll go look them up and see that they posted, but I'm not seeing what they've posted. Right. So then I'll just start liking stuff so that their stuff starts coming back around on my feed. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But it talks a lot about that and the divide stuff, and
man. Sketchy.
It's sketchy and scary. And if you're not self-aware and you're not, like, again, purposely like making sure you don't have like that cognitive bias, because it's easy to get sucked into. So if you're not making sure that you keep a diverse group of people around you, then it's easy to get sucked into that.
Exactly.
And swept up into that.
Totally.
But do you have any other questions, any other anything you would want to ask me that you think is a controversial subject?
I don't know. No, I'm just I'll say it again. I'm just really pumped to have you on the platform and excited to be involved at any capacity with what you're doing, because I think it's again, it's just necessary and these conversations are needed, and just the way you do it is special. So shouts to you for taking
Thank
that
you.
on. That does definitely takes a special person to, want to tackle this type of stuff, because me over here like, hey, I'd rather just steer clear. Let's just talk about what's working. We'll stick to that. But
what's gonna not cause any conflict?
yeah, I mean, that's a problem too, for sure, when you say it out loud that many times. But
and I think that's the problem. Like you might have said, like, you don't want to upset people or hurt people's feelings. Like, you want to kind of keep the peace. And I think that that's what we've been taught, is that you can't have these conversations because if you do, you're going to disrupt the peace.
yeah,
But
that's necessary.
You've seen me do it, where
And
we
it's
have these
necessary.
conversations,
Mhm.
and it is. And I
Mhm.
mean, that doesn't mean that every conversation is going to be peaceful,
Right.
but you don't get any further if you don't have the conversations and we just pretend like it's not happening,
Right.
or ignoring it. And
That's facts.
And I don't like necessarily conflict, but I'm an inquisitive person by nature. And so
Are you?
Yes.
I'm just kidding. Kind of picked up on that.
I could ask questions for days, and sometimes my friends hate it because they're like, oh my God. But I want to know. I want to understand. And it gets on my husband's nerves too, because he thinks that I'm trying to prove a point or trying to prove him wrong. And part of that's because my delivery is not always great. But I'm like, I really just want to understand, because I don't understand. And so when I don't understand something or it doesn't make sense to me, it's hard for me to accept it.
That's fair. No, I get that.
So just disclaimer for anybody that ever does come on the show or watches, like, I'm just asking because I really want to understand and really want to know.
That's fair. I mean, that's good. That's a great way to put it.
So
I appreciate you. Thank you for the chance, and thank you for the interrogation.
Thanks for letting me interrogate you.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, pump for unapologetically me, consistently being out here in the world.
I already have my next person scheduled for the next episode.
Let's
so I'm excited about that.
Sweet.
Yeah, she's excited too. So that's going to be a good one too.
It's going down.
Yeah. But thank you so much for being on here and being my guest. I really appreciate it.
Totally. Thank you. Dean Heasley says hi.
Hi.